All right, our last chapter on evolution is going to be chapter 17, which is going to talk more specifically about speciation and macroevolution. And honestly, this is a very short chapter. I only think it's like one or two sections long. But within evolution is micro and macroevolution, and I typically again don't like these terminologies or these words, these vocab words, but I think it's important to understand what they are. Microevolution, think small changes. These are small changes that happen to a population over short periods of time. Reminder: individuals don't evolve, populations do. So again, these are very short changes. You can see the microevolution down here, small changes within a species. Macroevolution is much larger. This involves something called speciation, which we're going to talk about next, but this is a long period of time, over millions of generations or millions of years. The reason why I don't like these terms is the only thing different between micro and macro is length of time. You can see micro is just a lot of small changes. Macro is the large scale. It's the same thing, just looking at different time lengths. And how do you define those time lengths? It's really tough. So I really don't like the terminology between micro and macro. Now, getting into speciation, what is a species? There are problems. We don't know, with the term species. There's no perfect definition, and there never will be. Species that are extinct. How do we know which two species or what a species is that are extinct? Asexual organisms. How do we know? What is a species when we're talking about bacteria? There's just so many variations of species or organisms that it's really tough. But the term that we like to do is or talk about is two organisms that can mate and produce fertile offspring. We consider them to be a part of the same species, and there are so many again just problems with this, but this is our basic kind of biological species concept. Now, the term speciation is the process of one species becoming two. And you can see here, this is a speciation event where species A and species B are different because of some speciation event here. And there are two really main types of speciation. Our first type is allopatric, when there is a geographical barrier between a population. One population changes, or even both change. And then you can see this speciation event where even if these two would mingle and interact, they wouldn't be able to create a fertile offspring. The other is sympatric, when there is no geographical barrier, and let me go back here. For whatever reason, there's a small group that starts to speciate and become a different species, and you can see what that looks like here. And our example here from the trees, you have our allopatric that was is from a geographical, and our sympatric where there's no geographical separation. Something within speciation is something called adaptive radiation. This is where there's a rapid new development of new species from a single ancestral species. And this is what we saw when Darwin went to the Galapagos Islands, where we had one species becoming many in a short period of time, because it was almost like they were kind of founding a new area because there were so many different islands that were uninhabited. So this is called adaptive radiation. And this is, again, like I said, usually when an organism inhabits a new area. We also see these with the Hawaiian honey creepers. Same kind of process that occurred on the Galapagos Islands occurred on the Hawaiian Islands as well. So the last two that we're going to talk about for the speciation is something called punctuated equilibrium and the gradualistic model. This is when a new species is going to evolve over a short period of rapid change. And then a gradualistic is species evolving from very small. You can see these two models between the gradualism and the punctuated equilibrium, where gradually this butterfly species is changing, but in the equilibrium or the punctuated equilibrium, you can see there is a rapid change. And again, this is just differences in types of speciation. Now, we're going to lastly talk about the isolating mechanisms. These are how different species are going to evolve. But basically, our pre-zygotic isolating mechanisms is before the zygotes actually produce. So this is before sexual reproduction has occurred. So you can see habitat isolation. You can see these different types of giraffes, and their coat color and their coat design are because of differences in their habitats. Next is temporal isolation. So when the different frogs are going to go through their mating season is going to depend on whether the zygote can be fertilized. You can see the wood frog is going to have a different mating season than the green frog. So obviously these two groups are going to speciate because of their like when they go through sexual reproduction. Behavioral, this is the blue-footed booby. They have a specific dance they do to attract mates. Not every bird species is going to be attracted to that mating pattern. So this is specific to the blue-footed booby. Uh, mecha- Mechanical isolation. All I'm going to say is the reproductive organs of these two organisms will not fit, and they will not be able to make a zygote, and that's all I need to say there. Gamete isolation, and this is the last one where everything else just seems fine. Like they live in the same area, everything seems like they should reproduce, and for some whatever reason the gamete just doesn't fuse, and they don't produce a zygote. So this is the kind of tough one where it's like everything seems right, but they just don't reproduce. Post-zygotic reproducing I'm sorry, post-zygotic isolating mechanism. This is where the zygote is produced, but the zygote doesn't produce a fertile offspring. So, like horses and donkeys, they have different numbers of chromosomes, 64 and 62. And in the case of the mule, they have 63 chromosomes. They're not fertile, so they don't actually reproduce. But they've already produced a zygote that's formed and has been born. So this is after the zygote has been fertilized, and for whatever reason, the mule can live, but they're just not fertile. And that's the end of chapter 17. Quick chapter.